Hey everybody, today we're going to be learning how to balance equations. And all that means is we're going to be learning how to fill in these blanks with the correct numbers to give me the same number of each element on both sides of the reaction. So the first step is related to what you guys learned in the last video. We're going to count my number of each element on both sides. So in this equation, we're only dealing with two elements. On the left side, it's what we call the reactants, and on the right side, we call the products. So the only two elements we're dealing with here are hydrogen and oxygen. And in order for me to figure out how many of each element I have on both sides, we're going to look at these subscripts right here. So the little 2 down by hydrogen, that's called the subscript. And that just tells me I have H2, so 2 hydrogens on my left. And when we're balancing equations, an important thing to remember is this number can never change. You're never going to change that little number down there. The only thing you can change is going to be what you put in this blank. And then for the right side, we have H2. So this means in H2O, I have 2 hydrogens. And then for oxygen, we have 2 and then 1. Right away, we know this equation is not balanced because we don't have the same number of oxygens on both sides. If I want to start by balancing oxygen, I can fill in a number in this blank that would balance it out. So that will change hydrogen, but to start off, let's just put in a number that would balance oxygen. So I have 2 on the left and 1 on the right. If I put a 2 right here, that 2 is going to apply to the H and the O. So now I have 2 oxygens, and it also goes to the H, which means I now have 4 hydrogens. So even though I balanced out oxygen, I did manage to make hydrogen unbalanced. So the next step is now I have to balance hydrogen on the left. So I've got 4 hydrogens on the right, and I have 2 on the left. So in order for me to make that balanced, put a 2 right here, and now we have 4, and now my equation is balanced. And if you have a blank with nothing filled in, like right here, you just assume that's a 1. So you don't have to write the 1, but you can write it if that helps you. All right, next example, we again just have 2 elements. So we have Na, so sodium, and chlorine. And just looking at the equation right now, we know my chlorine is not balanced. So we have 2 Cl's over here and just 1 on the other side. And my sodium is balanced since there's just a 1 on the left and there's 1 on the right. So the only element that I have to work with here is going to be chlorine. So if I want to make chlorine balanced, I can put a 2 right there. That will balance out chlorine, but that also affects sodium. So now we have 2 sodiums right there. If I want to make sodium balanced, same thing on the other side. Put a 2 there, and now we're balanced. So very similar to the last problem we did. So you just start with whatever element is unbalanced, and then you work from there. This one gets a little more challenging since we have 3 elements we're now trying to balance. So we just start by looking at our reactants on the left and our products on the right. So we have carbon, 1 and 1, hydrogen, 4 and 2, and then oxygen, 2, and then on the right side we have 2 here and then 1 in H2O. So we just add those 2 together. We have 3 oxygens right there. If you have the same element that's split up into 2 different places on the same side, you just add those 2 together. So a little trick when we're dealing with a problem like this is when we have something like oxygen that's split up into 2 different places on the same side, I would always save oxygen for last. So we could start with either hydrogen or oxygen, but oxygen is going to be a little bit tougher to balance because it's broken up in 2 different spots on the same side. So we'll start with balancing hydrogen. If I want to make hydrogen balanced, we could put a 2 right there. So that would make my hydrogen 4. Now that's balanced, but that also changes oxygen. So now the 2 goes to that O. So we have 2 plus the 2 over here. We now have 4 oxygens. So now I have to balance out oxygen. And if I want to do that, I can just put a 2 over here. 2 times 2 gives me 4. And now we've balanced that equation. All right, so next equation, we're dealing with nitrogen and hydrogen. For nitrogen, we've got 2 on the left and 1 on the right, hydrogen, 2 on the left, and 3 on the right. So neither of my elements is balanced here. So you can really start with either in order to balance. So another trick, if you have like a 2 and a 3, or you have two numbers that are not 1, so when you have a 2 and a 1, it's pretty easy. You just put a 2 and balance it. But when you have something like a 2 and a 3, there's a little trick to that. So if I want to make hydrogen balanced, the easiest way I can do that is I can multiply the left by 3 and the right by 2. And each of those would give me 6. So that's going to be the easiest way that I can balance out that element. So I can put a 3 right here, which is going to give me 6 hydrogens. And then I can put a 2 over here. That'll give me 6 hydrogens on the right. And now hydrogen is balanced. And by putting a 2 next to the NH3, I've also changed nitrogen on the right. And now I have 2 nitrogens right there, and I've kind of inadvertently balanced nitrogen as well. So the last one, we have 1 aluminum on the left, 2 aluminums on the right, 2 oxygens on the left, 3 on the right. So we can use the same trick here. So if I want to make oxygen balanced, I can go times 3 times 2, and what that actually looks like in the equation is you get a 3 right there and a 2 right there. That gives me 6 oxygens, and that also changes aluminum. So now I've got 4 aluminum, since 2 times Al2 will give me 4. And now if I want to make aluminum balanced, I can just put a 4 over here, and now we're good to go. If you're struggling with any of the problems on the worksheet or the quiz, there's plenty of other YouTube videos that go through other examples if you need some more. Otherwise, you can reach out if you need some help.